It started with silence. Not the kind that feels peaceful or earned, but the sharp, loaded kind that wraps around a room like fog before a storm. The kind that warns you if you're listening. She wasn't. She had her back to me. That, in itself, meant nothing. But the way she stood, too straight, shoulders pulled unnaturally tight, like someone trying to appear relaxed but forgetting how, told me enough. Her dress had a faint crease just above the zipper, something that hadn't been there earlier this evening. I noticed it while she reached for a champagne flute she never actually drank from. That was clue number one. Clue number two was that he was already here. I spotted him across the room. Navy tie, crisp shirt, eyes scanning the space like he was still casing it. He wasn't drinking either, just turning a glass in his hand, slow, like he didn't want fingerprints on it. She hadn't introduced us. Said he was just someone from her advisory board, new finance chair. Doesn't matter, honestly, she added earlier that week when I asked his name. You wouldn't like him. He's too perfect. That was her version of funny. She said it while cutting grapefruit into unnecessarily neat triangles. I laughed because that's what you do when your wife makes offhand comments about men you haven't met. Tonight, she danced with him like muscle memory. No hesitation. No glance around to see who was watching. No guilt. But what caught me, what snapped something quiet in me, was how natural it all looked. Like this had already happened before. Enough times for the rhythm to settle in. She brushed something off his shoulder, an imaginary fleck of dust, and smiled in that controlled way people smile when they're trying to act like nothing's happening. That's when I moved. Not out of rage. Out of sheer, surgical interest. I made my way down the corridor toward the coat room, past portraits of donors and plaques with quotes about legacy and impact. The building was recently renovated, state-of-the-art lighting, a subtle lemon polish in the air. But underneath all that, it still felt like an institution. Like the truth wasn't welcome here. Like everything was about keeping up the frame, no matter what it hid. I took her coat. Not mine, hers. From the inside pocket, I retrieved a folded envelope I had placed there 2 days ago, when she was out shopping for thank you gifts for the board. That's what she called them. I had watched her GPS pin drop near a boutique hotel instead. I never said a word. The envelope wasn't for her. Not exactly. It was for someone else, someone who wouldn't expect to be involved at all. Someone who had no idea he was about to receive a copy of what she was about to read later tonight. But I wanted her to see it first. I wanted the look on her face when she realized it wasn't a letter. It was a menu. Handwritten. Specific dishes, precise times, initials instead of names. Pages of it. A collection. It would look random to anyone else. But not to her. Not when she realized I knew about the meeting at the Japanese fusion place 3 weeks ago, where she claimed the board had an impromptu strategy dinner. They had wagyu. She said she had soup. The receipt I'd found wedged between old loyalty cards in her car told a different story. So did the audio file saved in my private cloud. But that wasn't for tonight. I returned the coat just as they stopped dancing. She looked around the room like she'd lost something. Then her eyes met mine, briefly. Calculated. Her expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. And that was clue number 3. I walked out without a word. But I left the envelope in her purse. And this time, the menu had something extra taped to the back. A sticky note. It said, "You missed one detail." She'd read it. Of course she would. But she wouldn't expect the copy. She wouldn't expect who I gave it to. And that's when the real story would start. She didn't call. Not that night. Not the next morning. Not even when she found the envelope, which I know she did, because I watched her. Not through cameras. Not through any amateur trickery. I watched her the way you watch a chess piece after you've laid a trap 2 moves back. Her patterns, her deflections, her casual detachment, they were all part of her rhythm. And she never broke rhythm. Until now. The morning after the gala, she took exactly 7 minutes longer than usual to leave the house. She circled the kitchen twice, rearranged a bowl of oranges she never eats, and stood frozen for a full 30 seconds by the dining room cabinet. That's where she had found it. Her purse sat nearby, open just enough for me to see the envelope was gone. She walked out without breakfast, still pretending. That was fine by me. I wasn't interested in the reaction. I was interested in what came after. At 9:42 a.m., she made a call from the car. Not to him. That would have been too obvious. No, She called her sister Jessica, the one who always hated me with a level of passive aggression that belonged in a museum. Jessica, who once said I had the personality of an unsalted almond, right in front of me while pretending it was a joke. But that morning, Jessica didn't laugh. I recorded it. Jessica answered on speaker. She knows, my wife said. Her voice, flat, dry, like she hadn't blinked in an hour. Who knows? Jessica asked, playing dumb. There was a pause. Not hesitation. Calculation. Him. The envelope. He left one. I don't know what he's planning. Jessica exhaled like she was annoyed by the drama. Well, what did it say? Nothing. That's what's so creepy about it. It was a list of dinners. Places. Times. All handwritten. That's not even the worst part. He put a sticky note on the back. What did it say? You missed one detail. Jessica was quiet for a second. Then, did you? Silence. I couldn't see her face, but I could hear the moment she realized she didn't know. And that was enough. Now here's where it gets good. She didn't know that the list I gave her, the so-called menu, wasn't even the complete version. That was intentional. I left out the one detail I knew would unravel her slowly. The initials DM, scribbled in the bottom right-hand corner of the original document. DM wasn't him. He wasn't even in the picture yet. DM was someone else entirely. Someone she thought I'd never meet. But I had. Twice. The first time, it was by accident. A charity mixer where people wore name tags too small and egos too large. The second time, well, that one was on purpose. I'll get to that. Back to her. She came home that night with her eyes scanning everything like she was looking for a missing puzzle piece she didn't remember losing. I was in the study, pretending to scroll through emails. She paused in the hallway. You forgot to lock your drawer, she said. I didn't look up. Which one? She hesitated. The top one. I nodded. I know. And that was it. No accusation. No yelling. No panic. Just her voice, brittle and polite, holding itself together with dental floss. We went through the motions. Dinner. Some documentary playing in the background. But her attention was drifting, not toward the screen, not toward me, but inward, like she was rewinding time and trying to count how many threads were loose. She didn't realize I'd already cut the hem. She went to bed early. I stayed up, listening. That night, she opened her laptop and connected to her private email. I watched the traffic spike. Sent one email. Subject line. Need to talk. Not safe over text. No name. Just an initial. R. I smiled. Because R already had his copy, and I had the read receipt to prove it. But what he didn't know was who else got one. And that's where the real fun would begin. Because when the dominoes start falling, it's never the first one that matters. It's who gets hit last. The next morning, the rhythm was off again, but different this time. She wasn't cautious. She was focused. Not the kind of focused you get when you're planning a speech or prepping for a board meeting. This was the type that came with controlled panic dressed up in productivity. She cleaned the kitchen twice. Not cleaned organized. Strategized. Moved things from one drawer to another like they might whisper secrets back to her. She didn't ask about the envelope. Didn't bring up the list. But she was watching me the way a person watches an animal they think might bite. At 11:07 a.m., she left for her so-called strategic planning brunch. With Jessica. Now, that was interesting. Because 2 nights ago, she said Jessica was out of town until the 18th. I followed. Not with binoculars, not from the shadows. That's not how this works. I knew her better than that. She hated being followed, but she never noticed when she was anticipated. I drove past the cafe 20 minutes before they arrived, left my car a block away, and was seated at a corner booth with a perfect line of sight and a hat I didn't need, but wore for flair. They took a table by the window, ordered sparkling water, and leaned in like spies in a low-budget thriller. I didn't hear everything. I didn't need to. But I caught the important part. Jessica said, "You need to tell him before someone else does." And my wife, still flawless, still composed, replied, "He already knows. He's just waiting to see how far I'll go to deny it." Jessica glanced around the room. "Then what are you going to do?" "I don't know," she said. "He's not reacting. That's what scares me. He's not yelling. He's not demanding anything. He's just observing." Jessica leaned in. "You think he's planning something?" There was a pause. Then the answer I'd been waiting for. I think he already planned it. She was right. What she didn't know was when the planning had started. It wasn't the gala. It wasn't the boutique hotel. It was 3 months ago. A conference in Seattle she claimed was mandatory, where she shared a room with a colleague to save costs. Except she left the hotel-branded umbrella in our closet when she got back, and the initials on the handle weren't hers. That umbrella ended up matching more than she realized. But we'll get there. For now, let's talk about R. The man from the email. The one she reached out to when she thought it was not safe over text. He replied within the hour. I had access to her inbox from a shared backup she forgot to disable. Basic stuff. He said, "Meet me at the archive room, Wednesday. You remember the one. Same key still works." I printed that email. Not for her. For the person who had the other key. Someone she hadn't thought about in years. Someone whose name hadn't crossed her lips since the accident at the old firm she left behind with that convenient non-disclosure agreement. Let's just call that person M. M had reasons. And M had motives. That envelope was already on its way. But here's the twist. There was no actual archive room anymore. It was converted into a new internal audit office 6 months ago. The key didn't work. The staff was different. And R? He wouldn't be meeting her. He'd be met by someone else entirely. Which brings us back to her. When she came home that evening, she smiled like nothing was wrong. That was her last defense, the smile. It used to disarm, confuse, buy time. But not anymore. Not since I noticed that the only times she really smiled were when she thought she was winning. She asked, "Everything all right?" I nodded. Of course. Why wouldn't it be? She studied me for half a second too long. Then she said it. Finally. Quiet, smooth, almost rehearsed. "If you have something to say, just say it." I stood, walked to the cabinet, opened the drawer she never touched, the one behind the old business cards, under the manuals for electronics we no longer owned. I took out a small, sealed box, placed it on the counter. She didn't move. "What is it?" she asked. "Something you forgot to take with you when you left the Marriott." Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. She opened the box. Inside was the umbrella. The one with the monogrammed handle. Damn. Still damp from the night I retrieved it. "You should hold on to it," I said. "It's going to rain soon." And then I walked out of the room calm, silent, leaving her alone with the realization that I wasn't guessing anymore. I knew. And she had no idea how much worse it was going to get. She didn't sleep that night. I didn't need to check. I could feel it through the walls, the pacing, the rustling, the pauses where you know someone's just standing there, listening for the sound of something breaking that hasn't yet. Around 3:30 a.m., I heard her open the bedroom window, then close it, then open it again, like fresh air was going to sweep the shame out of her lungs. I stayed in the guest room. She hadn't asked me to. That would have required words, and words had become dangerous. Instead, we played this slow-motion chess where every silence was a move, and every casual glance a threat. By morning, her mask was back on, light makeup, perfect blouse, hair tucked behind her ear just enough to look effortless. But the tension betrayed her. She left her tea untouched. She checked her phone 3 times in the time it took me to butter a piece of toast. "I've got a call with the committee at 10, she said. I nodded, didn't look up. "That's the committee with R, right?" She froze. Just for a breath. "Why?" I smiled. "Just wondering how he's feeling about audit rooms these days." She laughed. "Forced? What the hell does that mean?" Now that was a first, a crack in the armor before coffee. I stood, carried my plate to the sink, rinsed it slowly. "It means you've been backing the wrong man," I said. She blinked. "You think I'm scared of you?" she asked, voice low. "No," I said. "I think you're terrified of the people I've been quietly copying on your greatest hits." I left her with that. By noon, she was on the phone again. Not Jessica this time. She called someone saved in her phone as Mira, events. Cute. Except Mira was retired. Had been for 4 months. I knew that because I was the one who sent her a bottle of champagne when she left the company, under my wife's name, of course. I'd included a card. From all of us. So who was she really calling? I traced the call. Not hard. The number belonged to a burner. Registered 3 weeks ago. Used exclusively to send encrypted invites. That was her real network, the back channel board. The people who made things happen outside of bylaws, ethics, or actual job descriptions. I finally understood. This wasn't just an affair. It wasn't about the man. It was about the system she'd built beneath me. Her own little shadow operation, like a private stock exchange where the currency was favors, blackmail, and precision timing. And I was just the husband, too mild, too steady, too convenient. Until now. Because today was the day I dropped the first real piece. At 3 p.m., a delivery arrived at her office. Hand-delivered. No return address. Just a brown envelope marked, to be opened in presence of chair. I knew she'd open it alone. Inside, a printed screenshot. A message thread between R and someone labeled D. It looked benign, technical jargon, timestamps, dinner banner. Except for the part where they joked about her. Called her overconfident. Predictable. Already half-burned. Doesn't even know it. The last line? Let her take the fall if this implodes. She thinks she's driving. She's in the trunk. I had retrieved that chat from a phone left charging in the wrong room during a conference in Tahoe. R's assistant had been careless. I hadn't. And now, neither had she. By 3:23 p.m., she had canceled her next 2 meetings and gone completely offline. Text bounced. Location turned off. But I knew where she'd go. The summer house. Ours, technically. Though she'd used it mostly for private retreats with board members and those little off-the-grid think tanks she loved so much. I let her arrive. Waited 2 hours. Then I sent her a single message. You should check the desk drawer. Left side. There was only one thing in it, a flash drive. And a note. This isn't revenge. This is bookkeeping. She didn't reply. She wouldn't. But I knew she plugged it in. And that meant she was now watching the full, unedited conversation between R and D. The one with the video. The one where she walked into the room, mid-recording, smiled, and poured them wine, thinking she was being charming. She wasn't. They called her a bridge. A means to an end. An asset with an expiration date. Now, she finally saw it. And the best part? That flash drive? Was labeled copy 2 of 3. She'd have to wonder who had the other. And which one of us was really holding the match. She didn't come home that night. No text. No fabricated excuse about last-minute board dinners or traffic on the causeway. Just absence. Which, for her, was loud. This was a woman who once fake cried when her assistant forgot to forward a donor's email. A woman who crafted entire monologues around being transparent and ethical in leadership. She never let silence speak unless it could be spun. So when she stayed gone, I knew she'd passed from denial into calculation. She wasn't licking wounds. She was drafting options. The thing is, every option she had was already rigged. At 7:42 a.m., a secure courier delivered a document to her legal counsel. Not to her personally. To the firm on retainer that handled sensitive disputes. I watched the delivery log. Signature required. Sealed. Black folder. Inside, her name, in bold, on page 1 of a whistleblower affidavit. The signature wasn't mine. But the information? That was carefully curated from months of data she thought had disappeared, documents she shredded, emails she unsent, private chats wiped under company cleanup policies. I'd recovered every one of them. Not through hacking, not through revenge. Through access. She used my devices. My cloud. My servers. She assumed because I didn't speak code, I couldn't read a system. She never once questioned why our network bill doubled for 3 months straight. At 10:15 a.m., Jessica arrived at our house. Unannounced. Still in gym clothes, but the expensive kind, and not a trace of sweat. She didn't ring. Just opened the door like she owned the place. I was in the kitchen, slicing apples. I didn't stop. She's spiraling, Jessica said. I gestured to the fruit. Want some? Jessica stepped closer. You know what she'll do, right? She'll drag you under with her. You're not clean in all this. You've known for how long? And you didn't say anything? There it was the bait. I bit into a slice instead. You sound worried. She narrowed her eyes. You think this is funny? No, I said. I think it's familiar. Jessica flinched. She didn't realize I knew about the email she'd sent to her 6 months ago, subject line, insurance. That one had been juicy. Contained 2 things I'll never forget. A picture of her standing too close to a man who definitely wasn't her husband, and a line that read, if she doesn't move soon, we might have to. Jessica was no bystander. She had plans for my wife's collapse. She just didn't expect the timeline to accelerate. She's in trouble, she said now, changing tactics. She's not thinking clearly. She's scared. I'd be too, I said. If someone handed me a flash drive labeled 2 of 3, and I had no clue who had number 3. Jessica crossed her arms. So you're just going to burn it all down? Your life, your reputation, hers, just to prove a point. No, I said. I'm going to let her do exactly what she trained for, manage a crisis. Jessica stepped forward, but I turned my back to her and started washing the knife. I came here to help, she said. I know. That's what makes it dangerous. She left without another word. I waited 10 minutes, then walked to the office, opened the drawer beneath the modem, and pulled out a black case, hard shell, fingerprint lock. Inside, a single photo, not of her, of a check, endorsed by R, made out to DM, dated the same weekend she was in Seattle, labeled Consulting Retainer, Communications Buffer. Buffer. That was what she was. A financial firewall. Plausible deniability wrapped in perfume and ambition. At 3:47 p.m., her email pinged. Just one line. We need to talk. No punctuation. Just that cold formality she used with people she planned to fire. I stared at it for a moment, then replied, I agree. But next time, bring your own umbrella. Because what she didn't know was that the umbrella, the monogrammed one, wasn't just a symbol. It was the missing asset from a corporate expense audit tied to a shell account. The shell account I'd traced back to her. And tomorrow, that information would land on the desk of the same chair she swore loyalty to on stage last quarter, along with copy 3. And that one has a bonus scene. Because I'm not the only person she underestimated. I just might be the least dangerous. The meeting was her idea. Neutral ground, she insisted. Public enough to keep it civil, quiet enough to talk openly. She chose a tea house downtown, the kind that prides itself on ceramic cups with uneven glazing and ambient harp music nobody really listens to. A place so painfully curated it felt like a performance, fitting, considering who I was meeting. She arrived 12 minutes late, wearing a scarf she hadn't worn in months. Not for fashion. She wore it because the last time we fought, I told her it reminded me of the first time I realized I loved her. That was the play, to anchor me in nostalgia before she started negotiating. She sat, smiled. You look rested, she said, eyeing me the way a chess player watches the clock. You look rehearsed. The smile thinned, but didn't break. She always went first when she was nervous. I don't want us to become enemies. We already were, I said, sipping. You just thought I hadn't noticed. She leaned forward, fingers threading together. Let's not turn this into something unsalvageable. You've been laundering favors through shell grants. Your consultants are funding their own promotions. One of your chair members used donor money to bribe a review board. Or calls you an asset. DM calls you an insurance policy. And you're worried about salvageable? She paused. Didn't flinch. That scared me more than if she had. You're not thinking long-term, she said softly. That was her new tone, threat masquerading as wisdom. I'm thinking very long-term, I replied. Like what happens to the foundation when its executive director is exposed for using a bereavement scholarship program as a front for kickbacks. Her nostrils flared. Barely. So you're just going to burn the house down? Even though you're still inside it? I already packed. There was a silence, the kind that doesn't come from peace, but from the understanding that one of us had already made the leap, and the other was still pretending there was ground beneath her. She pulled a folder from her bag, slid it toward me. Inside, a draft press release. Her resignation spun as a sabbatical to recalibrate direction and renew strategic clarity. Classic. A few flourishes about gratitude, reflection, and board unity. No mention of wrongdoing. No admission of a single crack in the dam. I set it down. This for me, or the public? It's for both of us, she said. You get your exit. I get mine. Quiet. Controlled. No fallout. Everyone wins. I smiled. Except R. And Jessica. And D. M. Those aren't your problems, she said quickly. Oh, they are now, I said. See, I didn't send the folder to the board. She blinked. I leaned in. I sent it to the grant recipients. The actual families. The people who lost sons and daughters and spouses and thought they were getting help, not funding someone's bonus. They get to see the receipts. The fake audits. The weirdly timed consulting fees. And yes, your face. On every page. Her hands curled inward just slightly. You think they'll stay quiet? I asked. You think they'll settle for your pretty little press release? She sat back, eyes narrowed now. Why? You danced with him, I said simply. Right in front of me. Like I didn't exist. And that's the least damaging thing you did. She tried to speak. I stood instead. Left the resignation letter on the table. There's a copy of that press release in copy 3, I said. Stapled behind the financial schedule for the Garden Outreach Fund. You should have double-checked the signatory on the last disbursement. Her lips moved, but no sound came. Hint, I added, walking away. It wasn't you. As I exited, I passed a young couple laughing at something on their phone, oblivious to the storm 3 tables away. That was the irony. No one around us would guess that a career just ended in 20 quiet minutes over Earl Grey and a resignation letter no one will ever use. And she still didn't know who I gave copy 3 to. But she would. Soon. 3 days passed. No headlines. No emails. No press releases. But silence? Silence was a roaring thing. It was in the way the Foundation's official Twitter page stopped posting quotes about leadership. In the way Jessica deleted 3 LinkedIn posts and quietly turned her profile to private. In the way our assistant updated his bio on the company's site, removing any reference to his strategic advisory work with nonprofit coalitions. And most tellingly, my wife stopped wearing her watch. Not because it was broken, but because I'd given it to her 10 years ago, and she knew I remembered what was engraved on the underside. Stay 2 steps ahead. The irony burned now. What she didn't know was that copy 3 had already been delivered. Not to a journalist. Not to a board member. That would have been too crude, too obvious. No. I sent it to a man named Leonard Glass. You won't find him on social media. He doesn't do interviews. But he has one defining trait that made him perfect. He's a legacy donor with a photographic memory and a vendetta. 10 years ago, my wife froze him out of a key seat on the advisory board with a silent coup disguised as voting realignment. She smiled to his face. He lost the seat by 1 vote. He never forgot. I'd met Leonard only once, at a donor dinner where my name tag was misspelled and no one looked me in the eye. Leonard did. He told me, with zero irony, most of these people are paper. They fold under humidity. I knew then that he was insurance. I just didn't know what for. So when I handed him copy 3, complete with timestamps, internal memos, shell routing numbers, and yes, the full resignation draft, he didn't even open it. He just said, "How loud do you want this?" "Loud enough for silence to be suspicious," I replied. And Leonard, God bless him, understood the art of the slow leak. The first ripple came in a finance blog no one paid attention to, just a hint about inconsistencies in scholarship distributions. Then a repost by a watchdog account. Then someone dug into the shell foundations tied to our. Within 48 hours, an anonymous email landed in 3 reporters' inboxes with the subject line, "The Garden Outreach Fund, a bloom of corruption." That wasn't mine. That was Leonard. He had flair. Meanwhile, my wife? She was scrambling. I saw it in the logs, 5 failed password resets on her burner. 2 encrypted emails sent to DM that bounced. She reached out to the chair of the ethics subcommittee, probably to get ahead of the spiral. But she didn't know the chair had also received a package. Not from me. From Jessica. Yes, Jessica. Because snakes always eat each other once the food runs out. She saw the ship sinking. She wanted her life raft. And she thought I'd forgive her quicker than my wife would. She wasn't wrong. Jessica sent me an email. No subject line. No body text. Just an attachment named proposal_final_final2.pdf. It was a full back-channel correspondence between her, R, and DM over 12 months of planning. How they'd rotate the consulting contracts. How they'd reroute donor money. How they'd dump blame if scrutiny ever came. And buried inside? A footnote that made my jaw tighten. Contingency. If he resists, pressure through the daughter. She'll fold. We don't have a daughter. They were talking about someone else's. A girl named Emily Porter. A 19-year-old who lost her father in a building collapse the foundation exploited for PR, and then used to pivot a scholarship fund that never reached her account. My wife approved the funding schedule. She didn't know I knew that name, or that I'd met Emily once in a hallway during a photo op. She was polite, reserved, grateful. I remember her saying, "Your wife is a force." She didn't say it like a compliment. Now she was a bullet in my chamber. Because my wife didn't just cheat on me with another man. She built a machine that devoured the vulnerable and smiled for the cameras while doing it. This wasn't about betrayal anymore. It was about extraction. And I was almost done tightening the screws. Almost. The article hit the wire at 8:17 a.m. on a Wednesday. It didn't scream. It whispered. But whispers carry when the room is already holding its breath. The headline was surgical. Audit trail suggests donor funds mismanaged by key foundation executives. Internal review pending. No names. No accusations. Just the breadcrumb. But anyone on the inside would know who the key executives were. And anyone on the outside, they'd start asking questions. By 9 a.m., my phone buzzed with 3 separate messages from mutual acquaintances, all variations of, "Is this about her? Should we be worried? This is going to get ugly." I didn't answer a single one. I just kept watching. The timing was intentional. That morning, the foundation was hosting its quarterly visibility breakfast, a fluff event where donors sip overpriced smoothies while execs parade out smiling interns and talk about impact pathways. My wife had to walk into that ballroom knowing her smile might make page 2 of an expose by nightfall. But that wasn't the twist. The twist was, she still smiled. Photos surfaced on the foundation's media page by 10:45. There she was, beaming, arm wrapped around a city council member, holding a plaque. Optics, always her first language. But I saw what others missed. Her left hand, slight tremor. She always did that when cornered. That same hand had trembled when she defended her thesis in grad school. When her father passed. When I proposed. By noon, a second wave hit. This one from a local journalist who did name her. Not an accusation, but in proximity. According to public records, the Garden Outreach Fund is helmed by Executive Director Claire H., whose sources confirm was involved in approving several of the now-questioned disbursements. Just enough to signal the shift. She was no longer behind the curtain. She was the curtain. At 12:14 p.m., she called me. I answered. No greeting. Just her voice, lower than usual. "You leaked this." "No," I said. "You did. The moment you used someone else's grief to buy yourself a promotion." "Don't moralize me," she snapped. "This is survival. Everyone plays the game. But not everyone hides the scoreboard," I said. She exhaled, long and slow, like she was trying to exhale me out of her system. "I can fix this," she said. "You can't fix what was never broken. This isn't a scandal, Claire. It's your blueprint." She was quiet. Then, "You think you're safe? That you'll come out of this clean?" I laughed once, under my breath. "I'm not aiming for clean," I said. "I'm aiming for accurate. You're destroying me." "No," I said. "You did that. I'm just installing mirrors." She hung up. I went to the garage, opened the fireproof lockbox behind the utility shelf. Inside, a collection of envelopes, numbered, each one addressed to a name from her private circle. Donors, committee chairs, strategic allies. Each envelope contained a curated dossier. Each dossier ended with the same note. "Your name appears in her ledger. You may want to get ahead of it." I didn't mail them. Yet. I wasn't after carnage. Not yet. I was after displacement. And it was working. By 3 p.m., R had removed every trace of Claire from his online portfolio. He updated his affiliations page, swapped the profile photo, and, most tellingly, posted a vague time-to-pivot message on social media. By 5 p.m., Jessica called. I let it ring. Then again. I answered on the third. "You're playing with fire," she hissed. "That's why I brought matches." She's unraveling. I've never seen her like this. She's unraveling because she's always controlled the narrative, I said. Now she's just part of someone else's story. She'll take you down with her. She's tried. 3 times, by my count. But you know what? That's what makes this beautiful. What? I grinned. She still has no idea how I found out. Jessica fell quiet. Because she didn't know either. And that made her nervous. Which meant I had one more move. One more lever to pull. And when I did, it wouldn't just shift the story. It would rewrite who she'd been pretending to be all along. For everyone. Including herself. She showed up at my office. Unannounced. No driver. No assistants. No makeup. No curated wardrobe. Just a faded gray sweater I recognized from college. The one she used to wear on Sunday mornings when we were broke and idealistic and still pretended we were building something honest. She didn't knock. Just opened the door like she used to, like we were still us. "I need 5 minutes," she said. No edge in her voice. No manipulation. Just exhaustion and something worse, doubt. I leaned back in my chair. Didn't move. Didn't answer. She sat down anyway, on the edge of the seat. Like if she sat all the way back, something might collapse. "This isn't survivable anymore," she said quietly. "Not for me. Not for you." That made me smile. "Survival's relative, Claire. You're worried about headlines. I'm worried about ethics violations, embezzlement, systemic exploitation, and a 19-year-old girl named Emily Porter who hasn't received the tuition she was promised by you." Her jaw tightened. She'd hoped I hadn't connected that thread yet. "I didn't know about Emily." "Don't," I cut in. "Don't you dare pretend this was all out of your hands. You signed the allocations. You shook her hand. You took the photo and posted it with the caption, 'Hope in Motion.'" She flinched. So subtle, but it was there. She wasn't here to deny anymore. She was here to bargain. "I'll step down," she said. "I'll disappear from the board, the foundation, everything. You get your clean break. No lawsuit. No press scandal. Just distance." And in return, she didn't answer. I stood and walked to the window. The city looked almost innocent from 10 stories up. Busy. Focused. Woefully blind. "Tell me, Claire," I said, still facing away. "Who gave you the idea to use scholarship funds as leverage?" She didn't speak. I turned back around. "Was it DM? Jessica? Or was it your idea all along, and they just figured out how to ride your momentum?" Still silence. Not guilt. Strategy. "You're not here to make a deal," I said. "You're here to see if I'm bluffing. If I've got one last card, or if I've just been playing wounded." She looked at me. Then, almost too casually, "What if I told you the ledger wasn't the only thing that could disappear?" I sat back down. There it was. The threat. "Finally. No need to tell me," I said. "I've already made a backup. Several, actually. Not just digital. Physical. One of them sitting in a safety deposit box registered to a man named Leonard Glass. One's in the hands of a reporter who doesn't like me, but hates nonprofits more. And one," I paused, watched her eyes flicker, "is with someone who used to call you Aunt Claire." She blinked. That was the moment she realized how far this reached. That someone she trusted, not loved, but trusted, had flipped. I let the weight settle. "You think I was some lonely fool in the corner of your empire," I said. "But I was the scaffolding. I knew the weight of every beam before you started building walls." "You've made your point," she said, voice frayed. "Not yet." I pulled a file from the drawer. Inside, a single photo. Printed. Old. Slightly torn at the edge. Claire. Jessica. R. A man half in the frame. DM. Before the suits. Before the polish. The four of them at a retreat 12 years ago, grinning like devils at a table full of drinks and notes. A note on the back. "Always draft the fall guy early." Her own handwriting. I slid the photo toward her. "I'm not your fall guy, Claire. I never was. But someone else will be. Because the board's already picked a name to throw under the bus when this explodes. And spoiler alert, it's not R." She stared at the photo, hands perfectly still. Then she looked at me. And for the first time, in all the years I'd known her, I saw it. Fear. Not panic. Not dread. Pure, lucid fear. The kind that comes when you realize your parachute might have been packed by someone else. "You can still walk away," she whispered. "I already did," I said. "The night you danced with him like I didn't exist." And then I dropped the real hook. "There's one more envelope, Claire." Her mouth opened. I stood again. "Not copy 4. There's no copy 4. Just the envelope." "Who has it?" I smiled. "You'll know when they open it. And when they do, she won't just lose her job, her network, or her name. She'll lose the narrative. And for someone like her, that's the real death blow." I didn't hear from her for 4 days. No calls. No emails. Not even through Jessica, who'd gone completely dark since our last conversation. Which meant either she was planning a last-ditch move, or waiting for one. She wasn't hiding. People like Claire don't hide. They wait to be asked back in. But something had changed. The stories were spreading now. Not virally. Not with fire. With calculated whispers. Just loud enough for donors to pause before signing their checks. For corporate partners to ask about third-party audits. For press contacts to circle the foundation's site like vultures who'd already smelled the decay. Meanwhile, R had gone full ghost. Pulled out of 3 advisory boards. Scrubbed his socials. Changed his number. That, more than anything, told me the hammer was about to drop. And I knew exactly where. Because that envelope I mentioned, the one she didn't know who had, it wasn't blackmail. It wasn't insurance. It was hers. Written by her. Years ago, Claire had this habit back when she still believed in things. She used to journal during retreats. Not for introspection, Claire didn't process. But she did strategize. Pages of thoughts, outlines, contingency plans, notes on people, vulnerabilities, psychological triggers. She called it her shadow file. She kept the physical copy in a fireproof box in the basement of our old house, the one we sold after she made partner. I told her I burned it during the move. I didn't. I kept it. Because I knew one day she'd forget who she used to be. And now I had proof. Inside the envelope was a single scanned page from that journal. A bullet point list under the heading. If I ever go too far, what I'd do if I were him. And the first item? Expose the rot before it's weaponized against you. Control the fall. Rewrite the narrative. She wrote her own downfall. She mapped it. She never expected anyone to follow it. But I did. And I didn't send that envelope to the press. Or the board. Or even Jessica. I sent it to Emily Porter. That same 19-year-old girl Claire had posed with like a political prop before sending her back to a dorm room without the tuition she was promised. I tracked Emily down. Quietly. Sat across from her in a library over coffee and truth. No spin. No bitterness. Just facts, timelines, records. She didn't say much. Just listened. When I slid the envelope across the table, she hesitated. Then opened it. Read the page. Once. Then twice. Then she asked one question. Is it real? I just nodded. She wrote it when she still thought decency was a threat to progress. Emily said nothing else. But 3 days later, her story broke. Not in a major outlet. In a student newspaper. A raw, unpolished headline. Where did my scholarship go? No drama. Just truth. Just enough detail to point a flashlight toward the mess without setting it ablaze. The kind of piece that makes people lean forward. Makes investigative reporters start sniffing. And the best part? Emily ended it with a quote from Claire's own journal. It's not about whether you fall. It's about whether you fall alone. She even credited her, Claire H., Executive Director, the Garden Outreach Fund, 2014. Claire's own words. Now weaponized against her. She called me that night. I let it go to voicemail. The transcript was clean. You're playing with things you don't understand. This won't end the way you think. She was right. It would end worse. For her. Because she'd finally reached the part of the story she couldn't spin. The part where someone else gets the last word. The board met behind closed doors on a Friday afternoon. No press. No live stream. Just 12 names who owed each other favors, sitting in a glass conference room pretending not to smell the gasoline soaking the floorboards. Claire was there. Not as executive director. That title had quietly vanished from the foundation's site 2 days earlier. No announcement. No press release. Just gone. She came in wearing the same Navy suit she wore during the Grant scandal hearings 5 years ago, when she defended the Foundation's innovative reallocation strategies. Back then, they applauded her composure. This time, they watched her. Like something volatile. I wasn't in that room. I didn't need to be. Because I knew what was inside the manila folder handed to each board member at the beginning of the meeting. I sent it. Each folder contained 3 things. A printed transcript of Claire's shadow file page. The same one I gave to Emily Porter. The receipt of a $60,000 disbursement meant for bereavement housing assistance, rerouted to a shell LLC tied to R. A timeline. Dated. Sourced. Verified. Signed by someone Claire trusted more than me, the Foundation's former compliance officer. He reached out to me last week. Said, I always wondered when someone would do something. He left the Foundation quietly 2 years ago. No scandal. just a sudden career redirection. Turns out, he'd been documenting the rot since day one. He just needed someone willing to turn the key. Now, the board had it all. And Claire? She sat through the whole meeting. Didn't argue. Didn't deny. Didn't even raise her voice. Because she saw what I left on the final page of every folder. A sentence from her own lips, spoken into a mic at a leadership summit 5 years ago. If you want to measure integrity, don't ask people what they believe. Watch what they protect when no one's watching. Her voice. Her downfall. The vote wasn't even close. Unanimous. She was out. No severance. No statement. No legacy tour. Just a redacted calendar and a scheduled press briefing under the heading Internal Restructure. But the real ending? That came hours later. At home, sitting on the deck, I heard a car door slam. Then footsteps. Slower than usual. Measured. She stood at the edge of the yard. Didn't come closer. Just stood there. Hair loose. Phone in hand. Nothing rehearsed. You broke it, she said. No, I replied, not moving. You built it on top of people. I just pulled away the foundation. She looked at me like she was trying to remember who I'd been. Do you think they'll forget? She asked. No, I said. They'll remember you every time someone mentions outreach and winces. She looked down at her phone. I still have friends. Contacts? Not everyone's turned. Not yet, I said. But they will. You taught them how to survive. And survival eats its own. She wanted to say something else. I could see it behind her eyes. Instead, she turned. But just before walking away, she stopped and said, You made me into this. I shook my head. No, I just stopped pretending you weren't already. She left. Not a slam. Not a scream. Just absence. But the final piece? It wasn't hers to deliver. 2 weeks later, Claire vanished from public life. No interviews. No rebuttals. No defiant op-eds. Just silence and shadows. Her name slowly disappeared from bios, meeting minutes, donor invitations. A foundation executive I once heard refer to her as irreplaceable casually mentioned her in the past tense over lunch. Claire was sharp. Ambitious, maybe too much. That was it. A career compacted into one dry sentence. But this story wasn't about her fall. It never was. It was about what I left behind. Because after all the dossiers, the transcripts, the envelopes, I had one more card. I'd been holding it for years without realizing it. It wasn't digital, wasn't explosive, wasn't even dramatic. Just accurate. It sat in an old shoebox under my workbench. A list. Not of crimes. Of names. 12, to be exact. Staffers, interns, volunteers, and yes, recipients like Emily. People who were stepped on, discarded, or used as scaffolding so Claire and her circle could look taller at galas. Each name had a date, a moment, a receipt, a photo, a line from an email. I didn't publish it. I didn't leak it. I hand-delivered it to a lawyer, one specializing in nonprofit class actions. Emily's name was at the top. She agreed to be the point of contact. When I met with her again, this time across a real table, not a campus cafe, she brought a folder thicker than mine. I wasn't the only one, she said. And I believed her. The case isn't public. Not yet. But it's real. And it's moving. Quietly. Claire doesn't know. She's in Italy now. Or maybe the Caymans. Doesn't matter. Wherever she is, she's watching the wrong doors. Still assuming I wanted revenge. But I never wanted revenge. I wanted record. To take every lie she sharpened and catalog it. To hand it back to the people she counted out. To put something permanent on paper before she rewrote it in her favor again. Last week, she sent one final message. There's still time to end this privately. I didn't reply. Instead, I forwarded it to Emily. Let her decide what's private now. This wasn't about a marriage. That ended the moment she danced with him like I was furniture. This was about reputation, narrative, power. She thought silence was protection. But silence, documented, becomes evidence. And I made sure every page had a witness. Somewhere out there, she's watching the ripples, wondering when the wave will hit. What she doesn't realize is it already has. It just hasn't reached her shoreline yet.